All right, everyone, let's get the show started here a few minutes late. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's December 14th, 2022. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse is a DevOps accelerator. When our dogs aren't barking, we're pretty good at helping companies conquer AWS using our proven blueprints for Terraform. If you're starting from scratch or just not happy with what you have today, then you need to go to cloudposse.com/quiz to book a session with me. I'll show you what your future can look like, and you can have that today. So for those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. If you're curious about Cloud Posse or any of our open source tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. We host these calls every week. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support what we do over here, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse. And don't forget to share these videos with your team. If you want them to level up and stay on top of all the news and events that we share here, this is a great way to help that or make that happen. So with that said, let's jump over to our announcements here. First one is a tool that was brought to my attention via our Slack community. Actually, somebody posting a message like, hey, what is Cloud Posse's recommended way for developers to leverage secrets for local development? And what is our prescribed way of doing it? Cloud Posse has kind of walked back our prescriptiveness on this. Back in the day, we were big proponents of using Chamber. We use Chamber for like almost everything. But that was like before we were leveraging like external secrets or some of the other options came out for managing secrets. And now we just kind of do it on a case-by-case basis. Well, there are a lot of options out there. You can use HashiCorp Vault to manage those secrets, and there's an end console to export those secrets as environment variables on your terminal. There's still Chamber, which pulls those from SSM. I'm sure there's something like Chamber for ASM, Amazon Secrets Manager. 1Password has conquered the console now, and 1Password has their method of exporting secrets from 1Password as environment variables. You get the drift. There's a lot of options there. And your secrets, there might not be a single system of record for all of these secrets, and trying to pigeonhole them all into Vault or something might not be the right answer. I mean, you might not even be using Vault since that's a more enterprise focused product. So enter Teller. No experience, never even run it. Armchair advice here, recommending it, but it just looks really interesting. So I'm curious to hear from other people if you kick the tires on it. Teller is a way of pulling now your secrets and credentials from all of these different systems that you might have amassed over the years and exporting them in your current session, like a terminal session that you're working on. That's better than what I see a lot of companies do. Is unfortunately they either use Slack. Hey, can somebody give me their .m file with all their secrets they use for local development, and then that sprawls across the organization, or they commit that file to version control, which is obviously also not recommended. So this seems like a good way to facilitate a repeatable process, a workflow-driven process for distributing secrets in a more or less secure way.
Can I add a rebuttal?
Yeah. Okay, go for it.
My only qualm from having looked at it, and again, I haven't used it other than just very cursory look at it, is if you store your secrets in all these different systems and you want to get them out and expose them in NVARs, that's great. But that also means that the credentials to access all of those other systems have to somehow already be in your environment so that you can use Teller to retrieve those credentials from Teller.
But that's true of Chamber. That's true of Vault. That's true of everything. I guess the one exception to that is your local keychain. But then how did they get in there? Okay.
Yeah. So that just becomes my question though, is like, is this really just security by obscurity? Because if I have credentials that allow me to access Vault and pull the credential that I'm looking for, and those credentials are hard coded in my environment anyway, let's just say, how is it really more secure? And I'm sort of playing devil's advocate, but I'm sort
I know.
being real too. Like,
Yeah. So how do I target that? And I know you're playing devil's advocate to the degree. I think the point I would like to highlight with this is, yes, the end result, if we just look at the end result, developer has these integration secrets. We are net zero gain. Like there's nothing has improved. What we've improved is the reality of an engineering organization is how did those secrets end up on the developer's workstation, and what is the process to rotate, update, and do that? This comes back to kind of like my whole premise, like with Atmos, right? So Atmos is a workflow automation tool, and why it's important is that businesses succeed because of their workflows. So this is what we're talking about here is a purpose-driven workflow for how to exchange secrets that inevitably you're gonna have to exchange. So let's not have developers come up with their way of doing it with a whole bunch of gists stored on GitHub or wrapping the 1Password CLI and doing that. Let's just have a bona fide way of doing it that we can document and repeat.
Yeah, I suppose that works. My argument would be it's a heck of a lot easier to store like an encrypted .env file in your repo and then give the developers the ability to use KMS or something to decrypt it. But
okay.
So anyway,
there's many ways to skin this cat, and it's been done before. I guess
at first I was excited. I was excited about it when I first saw it. Then as I started digging through it, thinking through it, I was like, is this really better? Like,
we're just adding complexity where we didn't even have any. So one of the comments we had internally on the thread when I posted this was, I hope that when this runs, it's not going to trigger like 1Password to prompt me for my fingerprint every 5 minutes or whatever, something like that. And then reconciling that with what you said, like what's more convenient, your keychain. Maybe a nice hybrid of this would be something where this is actually a tool to help you populate your keychain so that you can continue on with your day in a way of ingesting that. Now, I don't love the idea of these secrets being just populated all over the place. I don't know. All right.
So I'll add. I sort of solved this myself, like, and I'll add my way. Not that I think it's like great or anything, but it works. So I wrapped the 1Password CLI like you talked about to do it so I can get everything out of 1Password. But then I hit that problem of exactly what you said. Every time I launched a new shell, 1Password is like, put your fingerprint here to unlock. And I was like, this is so frustrating. So what I ended up doing, and I know this sounds crazy, but I just run Redis. And then I store all that script that wraps the CLI, actually writes the secret to Redis with the TTL around something I think is reasonable, and then it gets done. And like running Redis was as simple as brew install Redis. Like I didn't have to do anything more than that to get it running. So but that's my
was that your system I saw last night with my Redis scanner? No, I'm joking.
Yes. No, on my laptop, just on my laptop. Yes. But anyway,
that's my fear with that.
None's easy
in the wild. My fear with that in the wild is too many people would have somehow that Redis
it's
down
only,
to 0.0.0.
No, it's only listening on a sock. So
I
basically talk to it.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, curious about anybody else's input on this tool, if they've used it or like the idea, or what you've done in place of Teller.
I'll weigh in and say that I agree with Matt in regards to, SOPs is the, hey, you have an encrypted file in your local on your local machine that's managed via KMS, and we use that a lot. And I push people towards it because I think it's, particularly for the people that I work with, it's usually a lot lighter weight and easier to manage because people already have AWS credentials or whatever cloud they're on. But this looks interesting for the mid-market to enterprise folks who, they're not going to have one secret store. Probably they're going to have many, and their means by which of dealing with that is going to be fragmented and ugly. So this would provide a really good solution for them to kind of bring everything together easily for their developers and maybe give them a path towards moving in one direction, which I kind of, I could definitely see suggesting it for an enterprise client of ours. It also looks like it does a ton. I'm interested, you were scrolling through that README and I just did it myself. It does a lot more than just managing secrets for you locally. It seems like it's doing an interesting amount of stuff. So I'm surprised we haven't talked about it before, or I haven't seen it before. Somebody put a lot of work into this project, which is interesting.
It has so many stars too. I'm surprised I find out after 1,000 stars.
And its own org, it's not managed by one person. It looks like it's cool.
I thought it was a consulting company, no? But maybe, I guess you're right.
Yeah, so the only thing I will say that I shouldn't say the only thing, but one of the things that I will say that I do like, that I think is a good security practice with this, is that it runs your commands. You have to run this as basically like a wrapper around all the commands you run around it. So it runs your commands in a subshell, like a la AWS Vault, the same way that AWS Vault does it, and it only exposes the appropriate secrets to that subshell, which is a good practice, because if you have something that's compromised in that subshell somehow, you're not accidentally leaking secrets for other things that you may have in your environment. So that part I do like that part. So I won't completely trash it.
You can tell it which ends to expose to which command.
So in your you drop in your project wherever you're working like a config file, and that config file tells it what to get and expose, basically, when you run teller.
Yeah.
So like if I'm working on my node application, I only get my node application secrets passed into it. I don't get my vault secret that I also have in my environment passed into it automatically. So I think that's a pretty cool way of doing it.
Yeah. Cool. Any last thoughts on this one?
I have a related question.
Go for it.
So I work, heavily in the federal government space, DoD. They have lots of compliance regulations. One of the things I'm running into nowadays is they came out with a STIG for Kubernetes. It's a security technical guide, implementation guide. And it basically says you're not allowed to mount your secrets into pods using environment variables. What is the commercial community's feelings on that? Because I feel like, I could jump through hoops and bring them in as a file or something if the application that's using them is capable of pulling secrets from a file instead of from environment variables. But I don't know if I've really gained anything by doing that. Security.
A secured volume mount or something like that would work. That's how the CSI driver will do it. Basically treat it just like a mount, and that's that.
Is that more secure than mounting a secret
storage
as
is
an
encrypted and ephemeral? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Because then you get far less secret leakage from things like environment variables, usually. But I don't know. So
I think the one we have to highlight the one thing that that is not universally understood by everyone about environment variables, and also, let's say, Docker. So with Docker, every process is just globally visible to anybody who has access to the host machine and can navigate the proc folder. All environment variables are accessible to all other apps that have access to the proc directory. Or within that container, for example, any other process within that container that has access to the those processes of the container can view those environment variables. And this is ultimately what the security people are getting at, is that environment variables are I guess, a great 12-factor pattern, but they're not a security pattern. And that's why the mounted config files is, technically speaking, the right way to go. Now, I think that the universal support for doing that, and what's nice about environment variables is it's a standardized interface that's been around for decades for how to pass config information, and we're just piggybacking on that. But when we get to using encrypted files or mounted files or anything like that, there's no standard, and that's the part I don't like about it. So it's one of the things that we've taken a conscious decision at Cloud Posse, is like, how are we going to, pass environment variables for configuration to our apps? And we've decided to use environment variables, full knowing that there are these security concerns about it that you should be aware of. The other options is, using configuration files, but this gets to that point I was talking about.
Yeah. There's probably a happy medium. Encrypt your envars. No. Encrypt your envars and give your app the ability to decrypt them.
Okay.
Using some sort of key.
I don't disagree per se, and that key would be passed on file.
Right. And the key is passed as a environment. As a file.
No. I'm thinking more like if you're in a cloud environment, like KMS permission to decrypt a key. Then you can actually just call KMS like decrypt on that text and get back the plain text.
Is that something that the app has to be aware of and are capable of doing, or can I abstract that out of
No, you
app?
need it in the app.
Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me.
All
All
so
the
many
good stuff
apps
is
only
built into
take
the app if you want to do it right,
Yeah.
But no one wants to do that. So
yeah, I mean, the only other way to do it without like app support would be as if you had some sort of wrapper that essentially like decrypted the encrypted environment variables and passed them into the app at like launch time, basically.
But if it does it as an environment variable, we still have the same problem. So it has to pass it in some other way.
Right, some other way into the app, which could be, and if it does it as a CLI parameter, you also then have the same problem, because you can see the running process with all the environment, with all the CLI.
Well, and what drives me nuts is the way they check is they look at the Kubernetes manifest and they see if you're, mounting any secrets as environment variables. Doing this thing with this wrapper, I would argue, is no more secure, since you're still assuming you have to use environment variables to pass the configuration value into the app. Using this wrapper is no more secure, since at the end of the day, that value is an environment variable in that container.
Yeah.
But the scanning tool doesn't see it, so they go, yeah, whatever.
Oh.
Yeah. I wasn't necessarily saying that it was more secure that way, but I was saying you could game the system that way. But truly, if you have your app support it, where your app can like decrypt the encrypted secret that's in the environment variable, then that's probably the most secure way to do it. With environment variables.
I think it would be more, the most secure way to do it would be for the application to have an identity of its own that's able to actually request dynamically the secret that it needs for only the period of time that it needs it, and then renew that when it's done, or if it needs it again. That's Vault integration, to a T. So,
and that's why I said that's the most secure way to do it with environment variables. That was
it's really hard to do.
It is.
Yeah, and it requires that you are in control of that app. A lot of my work is integrating Keycloak and Elasticsearch and whatever else.
Got to wrap around everything else.
Yep.
I'm glad to have the extra data point, Eric, that you guys chose the route that you chose.
was something pretty cool back in the day. It's no longer maintained, by Kelsey Hightower, called conf, if anybody remembers.
One of his claims to fame.
Yeah. So this was pretty cool. You know, it watched etcd for changes there, and it could dynamically rewrite files anytime those things changed, and then it had hooks to restart a process or so forth. I think the one thing I hate about files is, well, it's a cop out, because if we start going to files, those files, even if the app supports a file, those files are probably of some dynamic format. And you're probably not going to want to template all that in your Helm charts and so forth. So what is nice about this archive, well, it's not archived, but it is deprecated. I thought, but I guess people are still pushing commits to it. Anyway, provided a way to manage those files.
Yeah, and for that matter, I mean, if you're using Kubernetes, like kube secrets will do the same thing for you. You can essentially get the pod to reload once the secret changes, but it doesn't necessarily get around a lot of the other problems we're talking about now if the app isn't aware of how to retrieve the secret.
Yeah. But non sequitur, I just realized I opened the tab and I forgot to ask. There was that whole thing with SOPs looking for a maintainer, and Mozilla, saying that they weren't going to continue to maintain it. Maybe I couldn't find the issue, and
it's in the discussions. They're still pushing the idea that they're going to get someone internally, and then I think there's folks like me and others who are saying, hey, how about we just open it up to everyone? But they are, planning on continuing to maintain it. It's just they're a little slow, which is painful. But I mean, it does all the things that it really needs to do. I don't even have any feature requests for them. It'd be great to continually be getting it updated, because it is, a security in the security space of like managing secrets. You want everything to kind of be very much around, like updated continuously. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't had any major issues that I've created in it. And I usually do that when I run into problems with a product or problems with an open source thing.
I can see this one being kind of nice, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Hopefully it doesn't have to be, continuously evolve too much further, because it does.
Yeah, it's a simple tool that does, one thing well. And, usually you want to just kind of bolt those things together. I think it does support aliases. I think we do that for a couple projects. I wonder if I'm mistaken or what, but
yeah, I'm not sure. All right. The next announcement was just something I saw come across my feed that resonated with me. I see far too often small companies come up with this product, and they have more technologies than they have people on the team, more database types and queue types, etc. So this was a write-up, kind of cautioning against that. And many people don't realize just how powerful Postgres is these days, and that it has, it's a full document database as well now, with indexing support, etc. So, maybe you're not going to need all those other systems yet, especially until you validated your architecture, validated your product, decided this is actually the architecture you're going to need, and so forth.
Yeah, run all your Docker containers on Postgres. I'm just kidding.
I'm interested, just because you mentioned this, and I actually have a customer who's doing like an on-prem to cloud migration that we're helping them with, and they're trying to do a better job of their Oracle database search, and they want to evaluate search tooling, like Elasticsearch and similar. And I'm very hesitant. So I'm pulling in somebody who's more experienced in the application engineering world to like actually manage that discussion and architectural decision for us. But anyone that has used Postgres for really deep search capabilities across, a terabyte of data, let's say,
So I do want to qualify like what this, I think that this goes against kind of the essence here. It isn't like you have a well-built architecture spread out across all these different systems and now consolidate everything to Postgres and call it a day. I think it's more like you're starting a new tech company. You got 3 software developers. You build a stack that's based on Kafka, Zookeeper, and you got your Redis database over here. You got your DocumentDB over here. You got your Postgres database for this. You got your time series database for this. You got your this. And like you're a team of 3 people and you're building all this stuff because architecturally, yeah, it's maybe the right way of doing it, but you haven't validated that you're even going to reach a scale where you're ever going to have that much data and that much success to do all of that. Can you validate what you're trying to do in a simpler architecture with just Postgres to get it off the ground before introducing all this risk with all of these other pieces and cost, mind you? So that's maybe not, I don't think that's what you meant, but it just, because that was the follow-up question you asked, I just wanted to set the record straight here. That's who this is targeting. It's like when you have, no. All right. So,
and I think it's just specifically, if you look at the examples that the author goes into, it's, you know, don't stand up a third-party queuing system, don't stand up a separate document database, don't stand up, you know, a different relational database, don't do, you know, in essence, like another queuing thing, like, etc. Just try to do as much as you can in Postgres, because you can probably do the vast majority of what you're going to do in Postgres. Like that was kind of the TLDR, you know, for at least your initial development, and then scale as you start to have that problem.
To be clear, I like fully get what they're saying. Okay. And I think that like, this is a common, you know, thing. It's like, you know, it purely goes towards like, keep it simple, stupid, and goes towards like, keep your technology decisions boring, keep them reliable and dependable. Like that's what your go-to should be. I think I'm piggybacking off of this purely for my own benefit of, hey, I, you know, would love to avoid somebody doing, you know, having to roll out Elasticsearch for a client. I'm wondering if anybody had any experience in Postgres being a good search database, but yeah. I think that's maybe a totally separate topic. So somebody can reach out to me in Slack if that's of interest to talk about.
Yeah, I'll give you a really quick answer that I've used Postgres full text search before, and I was vastly underwhelmed with its capabilities. So I'll just say that.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. I you know, appreciate your opinion, Calhoun. So thanks.
All right. Next announcement was something I was a little confused on, but my understanding is the nuanced difference is this. So GitHub Actions has supported private actions and private shared workflows for some time now, at least, for GitHub enterprises under this interesting organization construct that I didn't learn about until recently, that I guess with GitHub Enterprise, you can have an internal organization as well as your other member organizations of this GitHub organization, I guess almost like OUs, I guess, within GitHub. And in order to use shared private workflows and shared GitHub Actions, those had to belong as part of that top level internal organization. With this change, I guess it's now possible just to have a standard GitHub Enterprise account and have private workflows and private actions just within that without transferring them into this internal organization. So this is good news. For those who are on GitHub Enterprise, it's bad news for everyone else because GitHub Enterprise is really freaking expensive and tough sell. All right.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think they have an internal, it's private or an internal repo. So in order to share actions, you actually had to have it be an internal repo, and an internal repo is viewable to every member. You know, you couldn't basically lock it down. So it's actually a nice move. The only reason we have GitHub Enterprise is we're an educational institution, and GitHub is very generous.
Oh,
to educational institutions.
Yeah, lucky you. I understand, and open source.
Yep.
All right. Next announcement is just something that Matt brought across our team today, and it's a really helpful tool if you haven't seen it. There are a few of these sites out there. The idea is that, like, if you're building an app that's generating webhook callbacks and you want to inspect those payloads, and you're actively developing it. Alternatively, maybe you're developing some system that generates emails and you want to get a JSON structured view of that. This service, it's free. You just open the URL and it'll give you a dynamic webhook endpoint that you can pop into your app and receive those payload responses in real time here.
Yeah.
I believe you can also self-post it.
You can, and I found this particularly helpful with building apps that work with some of the GitHub requests that are not always 100% up to date in their documentation. So create the request, point to GitHub, the GitHub webhook to come here, and then you immediately see it in the right here on the screen as soon as it gets sent, and you can actually see what the structure of that thing is. And it's a lot easier to deal with rather than having to write something that listens and maybe uses ngrok on your local machine to expose a port, and then console.log that so you can just see what the payload looks like of some webhook you're trying to develop against. So made it real easy from my perspective.
Cool. Yeah. Any questions on this one? All right. Next announcement was project came across from Weekly TF, Anton Babenko's newsletter. Project is called TerraCrust. My first, so first what it is, and then my first reaction, and then my second reaction. So TerraCrust is a tool in Go which will help you construct Terraform root modules. And this is a problem you'll encounter frequently when you've built up a pretty mature library of Terraform child modules and you want to string those together now in a root module. And you've got lots of different use cases. You have the use case where you want to have a VPC with an EKS cluster and an RDS database. But then you have another use case, which is the same thing, except where you're going to have that and a Redis. And then another use case, which is that plus an ECS cluster. And you could have one mega module with tons of feature flags, or you could just create root modules that are purpose-built for each one of those use cases. The problem is when you start doing that by hand, is that you often omit some of the variables that the underlying child modules support, and that leads to this thing where you're crippling maybe some of that functionality at the expense of spending more time doing it. But also, when you also expose all those variables, suddenly you got a lot more inputs that can overwhelm the end user who wants to call the module. So this here will help you generate that programmatically and keep it up to date, presumably, by generating the main file, generating your var files, and generating locals, some kind of template built across those. I haven't taken a deeper look at it than that, and my initial reaction was, stop, just use Atmos. That's why we wrote Atmos. This is the beautiful case with Atmos. You write your Terraform root modules as small composable blocks, and each one has their own state. And with Atmos, you get away from some of this mess. And then the second thing hit me. We have this freaking problem also with Atmos. So the problem we have is and why something like this is still probably beneficial for us, is when you go look at our modules here, we'll have this ALB module, and this ALB component is a Terraform root module. It has Terraform state backend. And this is wrapping our child module here. And I'm going to venture to guess that our child module supports a lot more than these variables here. So if we used TerraCrust, we could generate a root module that had all the variable inputs and updated this programmatically as a root module. And we have other use cases similar to this where, our VPC root module, will leverage, for example, like a VPC and like subnet module.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say, is I think that's where this falls down, is when you don't have a one-to-one mapping with your root module and what it's calling on the back end. When it's actually doing composition in the root module, it doesn't seem
So I
like...
think that's... Sorry, I cut you off. Timing.
No. I was going to say, it doesn't seem like it's the greatest fit, and maybe I missed something in the other in this project, the Cross project.
Yeah, let me see here. My assumption was that the reason why they're using the reason why it generates locals is precisely as the glue when you're using lots of child modules. And then my presumption was there was a way to leverage multiple, like here, one module, two modules. Yeah, so I think it has a way of you can specify any number of modules, and then basically, is this going to solve 100% of use cases that want to work this way? No, I think they are establishing a convention to follow using locals and multiple child modules, that when you follow this convention, this technique will work pretty well. But I don't think it's going to work in every situation by any means.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is I don't see the first module using locals. That's why I thought it didn't work with it. I thought it only worked with one module, but maybe I'm wrong. Like if you go to main, like the EKS cluster right there, if you scroll just up like 3 more lines. No, sorry, scroll down. I meant just scroll the page up like that. Yeah. You can see the module EKS cluster, the first thing in this block. No, like the very first thing in this block. Yeah, there. Like it's actually you directly using variables and data from something else. It's actually not using locals, which leads me to believe, like, why isn't that module also wrapped in their locals thing if you could easily do that and pull multiple modules together to compose them? So, but I don't know. So admittedly, I haven't looked at it.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Any other feedback on this project? All right. Next announcement is, if you haven't been playing with ChatGPT, you've probably been, heads down on some production issue for the last 2 weeks. This is one of the most exciting things I've seen in a long time. I had no idea that we were this close to AI being this realistic. I guess I've seen some of it now with GitHub's Copilot and Amazon's similar product. I forget what it was called. So this is an example of something that hits close to home. I've been using ChatGPT mostly to ask just questions about life and things like that. But here's a practical example that can get you through your day job. Can you translate this Docker Compose file into a Kubernetes job with a PVC named Conda and an ephemeral directory for the SD cache? And he shares the Docker composition there. And this is what it comes back with. Here's a possible Kubernetes job config that corresponds to the given compose file, properly spelled out. And then a few notes on that configuration, by the way, if you're going to use it and implement it. So I thought that was kind of cool. And related to that was just another somewhat related Reddit also, which was, would ChatGPT pass your company's recruiting process, hiring process? And here's an example kind of a script of hiring questions you might be asking a candidate, and they fed it to ChatGPT to see what its answers were. Pretty good, insightful responses. Has anybody have some fun or interesting ChatGPT experiences to share?
I was just using it earlier today. We're doing a bunch of cross-plane stuff in my world, and I was using it to generate the start of some, templates.
Really?
For this.
Really?
Yeah, I'm terrified that it was able to do it as quickly as it was. Of course, their site today, at least, has been a little bit down.
Day,
but
yeah.
what's more relevant than Crossplane for this group is I just posted a link in the Zoom chat, and somebody wrote a Terraform generator using ChatGPT. I still think that was a horrible name. Anyway, watch the GIF. It's terrifying. I'm scared by this stuff. I wonder where we're all going to be 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now. But this is that's like the cynic in me that thinks that AI is terrifying. But it's also, like you've said, fascinating, and I didn't know it was here already. So interesting stuff, nonetheless.
This ChatGPT has a publicly accessible API.
Yeah, that's like the OpenAI's whole thing, is that a lot of their stuff is API driven. So you can tie the API into your product and or the artificial intelligence into your product, and that's, I think, where they make a lot of money. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's pretty darn cool.
Let's see if it can generate some Atmos stack configurations.
Yeah. So you got to fill us in. You've been doing some cross-plane stuff now, huh?
Yeah, I had my my senior engineer. She's been heads down in doing proof concepts and stuff like that, and I need and sturdy. So I don't know. To be determined. We're figuring it out. I'm excited, but I don't have much I can share at the moment.
Okay. Well, this is the place you got to make your announcement when you do.
I'll have a demo, maybe at the end of Q1 or something.
That's cool. That'd be really cool demo. This is another really rad thing I saw for Kubernetes. I'm not going to play the video here, but it's a very short 1-minute video showing how effective Karpenter is at consolidating your nodes. He shows in the video basically the cluster as it is at 11% utilization, costing roughly $26,000 a month. And after he runs the consolidation, he comes back with a cluster that is costing him $800 a month. And this tool that he's running is also really cool, just alone for what it is. EKS Node Viewer, which is an AWS Labs project. And this is the tool. It's a little Go utility, which will show you in real time the cost of your Kubernetes cluster, all the nodes and so forth. So pretty awesome, maybe if you're doing some load testing on your cluster and you want to see how it's performing. Also providing some transparency of cost to your developers or admins or whoever's managing the cluster. Make it easy for them to see it in a console-friendly way. So there you got 2 for 1. Has anybody played with EKS Node Viewer before? It's the first time I'd heard about it.
It literally got open sourced this week or last week. EKS Node Viewer, not Karpenter.
I know, yeah. Oh, I see.
AWS basically built it for internal use to develop Karpenter and for demos. And everybody in their Twitch live stream was like, "What's that tool? We want that tool. Hey, what tool are you using there?" And they finally cleaned it up and open sourced it. I think last week. I don't know when the first release is.
It looks like it. Like all the history here is just like a week old. So cool. And saving the best for last is a preview of something coming to you soon. We talk a lot about Atmos. Atmos is our tool for workflow automation. It works really well with Terraform. And what's special about Atmos is you can manage insanely large configurations that are described in YAML using an opinionated implementation of imports and multiple inheritance and so forth. One of the natural next steps, of course, once you have all this is, well, how do we use it in a CI or CD context. So when you use Atmos, you're using workflows in a monorepo kind of context, similar to like if you had a monorepo for applications, like TypeScript. And the challenge then is, how do you know between any two commits what was affected? It's not as simple as just saying what files changed, because other files, other things depend on those files, and then those become affected as well. There's lots of tools for working with monorepos, but they're all very obviously language specific. There are some generic ways, I guess, as well, but when you have a generic solution for working with monorepos, it's not as great as the specialized one for your specific use case. So choose what works for you. But hey, if you're using Atmos and you want to use it in a CI context or CD context, that's now going to be very achievable, very possible, because we've added a missing command called Atmos describe affected. And this is borrowing on some terminology, was the tool Matt called NX for another monorepo tool. And what this will show you is every single Atmos component and stack that is affected between two commits. It'll default to whatever branch you're in against the main branch, and we'll tell you that. So what you get back is a list that looks something like this. I believe we support multiple output formats. This is the programmatic one in JSON that's convenient to use, that in your downstream actions that can now take some step, like, hey, maybe we should plan all of these other ones that are affected by this change. So the trajectory here is, of course, that we are building GitHub Actions for Atmos as part of some engagements that we're doing. That stuff will be open sourced as well. And this here is a step in that direction. Matt, anything you'd like to add to this? Any questions from anyone else on this?
I'll continue to speak up. Sorry if I'm I'm interested. So this is similar to what Terramate does, what the Mineros folks are doing with their tool. And then this JSON output that you have here will basically allow you, and I'm, overly familiar with Atmos and the way, space lift and how you all do that. Basically, this JSON output, if you run this before, will enable you to write a much simpler OPA policy to kind of trigger which stacks are getting proposed or triggered properly as part of a push. Is that what this will end up being?
That is what okay, so yes and no. So we are doing this as a just Atmos specific thing, to work in a CI context. So whether you're using GitHub Actions or something similar. Spacelift obviously has their whole Rego policy framework, but it's all based on metadata that's only available really in the pull request or the commit. And that's very limiting. It's only there for basically files changed, but the dependencies there is not a thing. Spacelift has a concept of dependencies that can be expressed explicitly, but implicit dependencies are not there. This is giving us the full list of dependencies by understanding all the configurations and what they mean and how that works. I would love to, what this probably means we could do, Matt, in a Spacelift setting is we can short circuit a run, that we can still run this as part, Spacelift will still call Terraform, it will still call Atmos in our case, but it would just exit 0, no changes, because we already know it's not affected.
Yeah, I can have another idea for you.
Okay.
If you were to use this as a pre or post commit hook, you could check this file in, and Spacelift could maybe read it. Like maybe those
Yeah.
RICO policies could read it. I'm not sure. Like that's just something that came to mind. But anyway,
Yeah.
you're moving that logic into Atmos, which is really smart. And then it's kind of, you don't need to re-implement that everywhere. Spacelift is a little bit restrictive in what you could do, but I get it. I think we're probably talking black magic to other folks. So we can stop this line of questioning. This is cool. Very cool. I can see the use cases.
I'm gonna have to noodle on that one. It's a really interesting idea. I don't know if you can make Spacelift policies that operate on anything inside of a JSON document or a YAML document. That would be required if we committed this file. That would be still the requirement, is that we can then generate kind of affected stacks based on the values in this file. I don't see a way of doing that. But I think it would be nice to talk to Spacelift about supporting, something else that can generate markup that the policies can operate on.
Yeah, or if the policies, if they added a function to their package, their Rego package, to support reading from a file like this, something like that.
Yeah, maybe that would be that's probably the way it would be done, is implemented that way. Another
Regardless,
one,
good stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Another interesting one would be kind of like how this relates to Atlantis. And I think it still will improve integration with Atlantis. For example, I don't think as part of this pull request we're implementing it, but being able to plan affected and apply affected, for example, if we added that kind of functionality, then Atlantis would also be able to benefit from this. Cool. No other questions. We'll get into the. Holy moly, we had a lot of fun today. It's already half past 2 my time here, so we're basically over. Any quick questions that I can answer for today that anybody has in the remaining minutes? There's been a very active Zoom chat here. I apologize, I haven't stayed on top of. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate your time today. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do so by going to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. It helps us out a great deal. If you'd like to register for our live and interactive sessions, go to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/officehours. To book a session with Cloud Posse and learn about our offering and how we can help you using our blueprints for Terraform, go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz. And to stay on top of all of these announcements that you heard today and other ones, go to newsletter.cloudposse.com to subscribe. We send out a weekly digest with all of this information as well, so you don't miss a thing. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.